Dr. Chopra, we have just spent the past few minutes talking about your previous book, Super Brain. Now, before we jump into your new book, Super Genes, what I'd love to do is give our students, our members, and all of our guests access to understanding your story. Because as a leader, we want to understand where you came from, as a university student to where you are today. If you could share some of that journey with us and some of the pivotal points along the way, we'd love to have that story shared with our members.
Well, I learned how to be a medical doctor. I took training in internal medicine and endocrinology, which is the study of hormones, and then I studied neuroendocrinology, which is the understanding of brain chemistry. At this point, I became very interested in how what happens in our mind or in our consciousness influences what happens in our biology. When I was studying, we were making new discoveries in that we were finding that there were certain chemicals in the brain which we call neuropeptides, which are literally the molecules of emotion. So it became obvious to me that emotions are very important in how our body responds to the world, but also emotions trigger changes in our biology. If you're stressed, you have a certain biology. If you are happy, in love, feel compassion, you have a different biology. So that was obvious to me, but then the second part was, why was it that two people could be exposed to the same virus or infection and not everybody got sick? Mm-hmm. People got exposed to the same carcinogen, not everybody got cancer. Or why two people saw the same physician, got the same treatment, had the same illness, and had different outcomes. So I started looking for a connection between what was happening in our biology and how it was responding to what was happening in our consciousness. At this time, there was no science for this, except the one that a few of us were doing. So mainstream medicine was not very responsive to it. But I had an inner conviction that I needed to explore this and that this was my calling. And so, in a way, I did it, notwithstanding the fact that I was heavily criticized, vilified, called a charlatan, and many things. Now, 30 years later, we have the science. Mm-hmm. We have the science of the mind-body connection or inseparability. We have a science on how the brain is rewired depending on our experiences of life and our behaviors. We even have a science on how our genes are influenced by experience. And so, this was my personal journey. I had to be immune to both criticism mm-hmm. and flattery. Mm-hmm. I had to, in a sense, be fearless. And I had to not worry about what people said, and I had to have the conviction of what I knew to be true. I had to stand up to my truth.
I mean, so many different topics that you as far as finding out what your passion is, figuring out how to stand up for your convictions of where you wanted to go, so many things that will resonate with our students. And so, fast forward to where we are today, and let me ask you, it's an inspiring story to hear where you came from to where you are today, but what was the inspiration with this, Super Genes?
Well, Super Brain was written in partnership with a Harvard neurogeneticist. His name is Rudy Tanzi, who's also my collaborator in this book. And I met him at a TED conference, and we got to speaking actually in the men's room where we happened to run into each other, and I asked him if the brain was a noun or a verb, and he said, let's go outside and talk. And we started having this conversation, and soon both of us were saying, we look at the brain as a noun, but actually the brain is a verb. It's an activity. It responds to every experience. And since the brain is created by your genes, the genes are also verbs. They're not nouns, they're activities. So Super Brain came first and Super Genes now. We have 23,000 genes that make up the whole body. Mm-hmm. So when we were first conceived, that's all we had. At the time of birth, we acquired some more genes, and there were bacterial genes. It's called the microbiome. And so this microbial colony that's all in your skin, in your gut, everywhere, it interacts with the human genome, and then our own experiences of life, which is everything from personal relationships to emotions to social interactions to how we interact with the environment. That whole activity is called the epigenetic activity, which influences the expression of genes. It's quite complex, but this is what we know now. To make it very simple, every experience and how we interpret experience actually influences the activity of our genes.